This is CBC Vancouver News.
It's a forested area and it is fairly rugged.
2 people are killed and 2 more hurt after a plane crashes in a remote area of Vancouver Island.
It's believed that the suspects may have had a vehicle waiting for them.
Police say they're now looking for 2 men after a Sikh leader was gunned down outside his Surrey Gurdwara.
The vast diversity we have of Indigenous people here in Surrey is something to be celebrated.
And big celebrations. People across BC mark National Indigenous Peoples Day. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Homicide investigators are sharing new details in the killing of Hardeep Singh, Nier. The president of Surrey's Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara was shot and killed in the parking lot Sunday night. As Leanne Young reports, police are now looking for 2 men.
Days after his death spurred headlines around the world, police are releasing key information around the investigation into the murder of 45-year-old Hardeep Singh Nier. They believe they've charted the getaway course for the suspects, and they are describing the pair as heavier-set males wearing face coverings. The shooting happened at the end of the driveway of the Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara around 8:30 p.m. Sunday. Officers believe the suspects then took off on foot along 122nd Street through Cougar Creek Park to 121 Street, where a getaway vehicle was waiting for them. All in all, the distance was about 650 meters, about an 8-minute walk. And police are looking for 2 suspects for now, but they're not ruling out others. For example, there may have been an individual sitting in that getaway car waiting for them, but police aren't revealing details about that yet. There has been an outpouring of emotion following Nier's death, who was the president of the Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara. He was a high-profile individual in the community who advocated for a separate Punjabi state and was wanted in India in relation to terrorist activity in that country. He has never been charged with any crimes in Canada. With it, though, has come heightened interest in the motive for Nier's death, but homicide investigators would not give any details. Several journalists, including us at CBC, asked if investigators were speaking to other agencies like CSIS, Indian Intelligence, or RCMP about claims of threats to Nier's life.
Again, I can't say specifically what partners we have been working with, what evidence we've collected, but I can just tell you that we are open to any idea here, and we're certainly speaking with all of our partners.
Officers are now looking for dash cam or security footage, and anyone who's a potential witness is being asked to come forward. Leanne Young, CBC News, Surrey.
The Transportation Safety Board is now trying to figure out why a small plane crashed in a remote part of Vancouver Island yesterday. As Vance reports, 2 people were killed and 2 more were hurt.
The plane was on its way from Masset on the north end of Haida Gwaii, and it was headed down here to Tofino. RCMP say 4 people were on board the single-engine float plane. It flew about 600 kilometers before crashing near Tassis, a small community on the northwest coast of Vancouver Island, around 2 p.m. on Tuesday. Coast Guard crews and Mounties responded. Police confirmed that 2 people on board were killed. 2 others were flown by helicopter to Comox and taken to the hospital. The crash also sparked a fire about half a hectare in size. BC wildfire crews responded and the blaze is now under control. People from the village of Tassis saw smoke rising from a hillside down the Tassis Inlet.
It's a forested area and it is fairly rugged. The mountain sort of goes from sea level up to about 1,000 meters in that area. I'm not sure the exact elevation that it crashed at, but I don't think it was too high up, but it was where it hit a roadless area.
And Emily, what do we know about the investigation?
The Transportation Safety Board has sent a team of investigators to the scene to investigate what might have happened. They are working with the RCMP and the BC Coroner's Service. Mounties say that weather conditions may have been a factor, Dan.
Vance in Tofino tonight. Thanks very much. The trial of a man accused of killing a Burnaby teenager continued today, with lawyers for the defense cross-examining an RCMP DNA expert. A warning, some people may find details in this story disturbing. Ibraham Ali is charged with first-degree murder in the death of a 13-year-old girl in 2017. Today, his defense lawyer questioned the credibility of a Mountie search technologist, Jeremy Finn, asking if he'd tested any of the victim's clothing for sperm cells, if cross-contamination was possible, and the thoroughness of lab record-keeping and reviews. The Crown has said DNA evidence will tie Ali to the crime, but a direct link has not yet been made to the jury. People across Canada marked National Indigenous Peoples Day today. It's meant to honor and celebrate the rich and varied tapestry of Indigenous culture. As Yasmin Gandam shows us, more than 700 students and staff from 30 schools across the Vancouver district gathered to mark the occasion.
Traditional music and chanting could be heard echoing through West Broadway in Vancouver. From a 30-foot teepee painted by an Indigenous artist to a long list of performers, songs, stories, and dances honoring Indigenous cultures from around the world. A hit for many young students in the audience.
Do you think you've learned about the Indigenous culture today?
They sing a lot of songs? Yeah, that was so good, and like a lot of drums.
Happy, the music, Indigenous culture wants you to have the feeling of happiness, I guess.
Educators in the Vancouver School District say it's crucial to incorporate Indigenous teachings directly from Indigenous peoples into the curriculum.
This is the generation of reconciliation, because these kids have had a chance to learn from Indigenous people their whole school lives. And I think it's really important as a non-Indigenous educator to be able to have the opportunity to learn from and for Indigenous communities.
The overall vibe today, one big party and joy from Indigenous performers and activists, as well as students from across the Lower Mainland.
It is really about conveying Indigenous brilliance and Indigenous joy. And what you see on the face of the students is joy when they're listening to the music. And learning about the local nations here, the Hamathwim, the Skohomish Alkameo, the Tsleil-Waututh people, and as well as other Indigenous nations from across Canada and around the world.
The event was held at the VSB Education Centre, situated on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
Sharing traditions, cultures, it's so critical for us at the Vancouver School Board. Our education plan has a foundational goal of really understanding and focusing on reconciliations.
A sentiment that these kids are taking in.
My favorite part is when the first 1 week arrived.
Yeah, the welcoming?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yes, what's been your favorite part?
The teepees.
This is the 4th year the VSB has put it on, and they hope it will continue growing and evolving in years to come. Yasmin Gandam, CBC News, Vancouver.
Big celebrations were also held today in Surrey. Oh, yeah, The event was hosted by the Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, and Katzie First Nations at the Bill Reid Amphitheatre in Cloverdale. City officials call it an opportunity to acknowledge and show respect and admiration for Indigenous peoples past, present, and future.
We were in charge of the chili, but we have a hot dog station, as well as we have a whole bannock making station for the cultural aspect. And we've been preparing, pouring love, good intention, and good medicine into the food so that we can serve community today.
Volunteers spent 2 days prepping all that food for the attendees. Over 1,000 people took part in the art, music, singing, dancing, and storytelling. And in Prince George, celebrations continued in that city with live entertainment, cultural activities, and workshops. Artisan goods, food, and vendors were also on hand. That gathering was hosted by the Clay-Tenay First Nation. The Sawat First Nation is now the latest community to declare the creation of a new Indigenous protected and conserved area off the coast of Vancouver Island. The area is called Quant, and it means to be looking after. It will protect about 155 square kilometers of ocean at the eastern coast of the Saanich Peninsula.
We have a shortage of food fish, so this will enable us to have a nice, sustainable fishery for all the people in the community, so I can put food on everybody's table.
Since 2018, the federal government has committed more than $1.2 billion to Indigenous-led conservation efforts to fight climate change and acknowledge Indigenous rights. The Sawat First Nation is developing a plan to manage the area, focusing on education and data collection. To other news now, it appears many Canadians are still willing and able to spend plenty of money. Retail sales rose by 1.1% in April across the country, says Statistics Canada, coming in seriously higher than expectations. Retailers across the country raked in nearly $66 billion in April, up almost 3% from last year. Just about every type of store saw increased sales during that month, with food and beverage shops leading the way. Furniture, electronics, and appliances sales are the exceptions, though, with shrinking numbers. Provincially, BC saw a 0.5% increase. For more on this, our Anita Bath spoke with retail expert David Ian Gray earlier today.
David, retail sales rose 1.1% in April. They were only forecast to increase by about 0.2%. What's the significance of this?
Yeah, it's so funny the times we live in. If this was, 4 years ago, we'd be really alarmed by how flat a growth curve that was. But we're in a year where we think that demand is really going to be dropping off. So the shock there was not that it was a big month for retail, but it wasn't a bad month for retail.
So is that spending, though, driven by volume, or does the fact that prices are so much higher now actually play into it? Like, are people buying the same amount of stuff, but it all just costs way more, so that's pushing these numbers up?
Well, I was digging into the numbers today, and it kind of varies by category. So we know a lot about the food story. We're seeing automotive starting to come back online, and the car companies are not giving us deals. But on the other hand, it was noted in the press release from SaskCan, general merchandise and secondarily clothing were significantly up. And that, if it's a clothing story, it's really because we didn't buy anything for 2 years. We're starting to replenish, but there's no inflation in clothing. In fact, if anything, things are kind of perpetually on sale. So it just depends on the category we're shopping, whether or not it's an inflation story. But certainly that is a big chunk of the portfolio of buying is where we're buying a fewer items, but we're having to spend more on them.
Let's talk about a little bit more about where we're spending. So you mentioned clothing there. People didn't buy clothing for so long. Now they have to catch up on all the things they didn't buy. What about things like furniture and appliances not seeing an increase? Why is that?
Yeah, anything to do with the home has been really eroding through the latter half of last year and into this year. And I think part of that, it sounds a bit bleak, and they were actually some of the worst performing categories, including building supplies for renos and things like that. But they ran so hot 2020, 2021 that this is really just kind of a return to normal, if that makes sense. But for a given point in time, it's no fun if you're those types of retailers right now.
David, just quickly here, what kind of impact could the increase in retail sales actually have on the Bank of Canada's attempts to slow inflation?
Yeah, so they're very concerned. So the consumers right now are still demanding items, and that's the part that wasn't expected. So the pundits, including ourselves, are looking at the Bank of Canada to once again do a rate increase in July, and they're really concerned with the product price inflation. But as this comes into the consumers day to day and their credit card debt and their mortgages getting renewed, the game that's being played may run into a kind of a recession and a consumer-driven one. So we're really wary of where the fall looks and is going to take us.
$18 beds at the Phoenix Society in Surrey and 6 at the Covenant House in Vancouver. The new beds in Surrey will serve men from throughout the province between the ages of 17 and 24, while the 6 beds in Vancouver are open to young adults ages 16 to 24. A welcome addition, but some advocates say young women need more help too.
Difficult to be in that environment as a woman. I think there's such a need for women-only places that can just allow women to feel safe and secure no matter what's going on in their life.
Diversity, an organization in Surrey that provides support to marginalized communities, is concerned that these groups are being left out.
racialized communities, that within their culture, like seeking even mental health services is not very common in their home country or not accessible in their home country. And so they come here and people talk about accessing mental health services, but then there's gates that prevent them from being able to do that.
Terrell adds that marginalized groups have unique needs and are often unable to seek supports because of that.
If English is not their first language and they go to a hospital seeking advice, but they can't speak English and can't communicate properly or can't advocate on their behalf, then how are they able to access the services that they require to be able to get help for substance use?
Guy Felicella, who works with the BC Centre of Substance Use, says youth also need more support after treatment.
The continuum to move them forward. And you'd like to see some additional stuff being added in as well with employment opportunities as well for youth or for anybody going into treatment, because that provides purpose for people.
Vancouver Coastal Health is accepting referrals from healthcare providers for the new beds. Services will begin by the end of June. Yasmin Gandim, CBC News, Vancouver.
Welcome back, and sorry for that technical snafu. Canada Bread will pay a $50 million fine after pleading guilty to its role in a price-fixing scandal. Canada Bread admitted that under the previous ownership, Maple Leaf Foods, it worked with rivals to raise the price of wholesale bread and bread products. The company makes dozens of brands of baked goods, including Dempster's, Stone Mill, and Vachon. The Competition Bureau says it's the highest penalty ever imposed for price fixing by a Canadian court. The Canadian women's soccer team wants to settle its pay and labor issues with Canada Soccer before the World Cup. They'll have to do it soon. That tournament begins next month. And as Lindsay Duncombe tells us, it's just one of the challenges for the team as they prepare for the first kick.
Canada hopes these first drills could be building blocks to World Cup victory.
I think just to make sure that, we're hitting the ground running, we have to make sure that we're practicing all these little nuances to make sure that we're the team that's hoisting that trophy at the end of the tournament.
Julia Grosso from Vancouver.
Canada is the 7th ranked team in the world and reigning Olympic champions, but players expect a long, tough fight.
We've seen a lot of wins recently from Canadian players who play in Europe in particular, so they're coming in hot from those leagues, so it'll be really good to see.
Canada has talent. Julia Grosso named the best midfielder in the Italian League. Kaylin Sheridan, the best goalkeeper in the American National Women's Soccer League, led, of course, by Christine Sinclair, who has scored more international goals than any other soccer player on earth.
With goal number 185.
But the team faces a formidable group stage, including a match against home team Australia and superstar striker Sam Kerr. Outside the group, the American squad is ranked number 1 and no doubt bent on revenge after Canada crushed USA's dreams of Olympic gold. There's fighting off the pitch, too. In an interview with the Canadian Press, Captain Christine Sinclair said outstanding issues with Canada soccer need to be settled fast. We're not at a point where we're not getting on a plane, but time's coming where we want it done, she said.
They're still waiting to hear about funding and equal pay, but they've also haven't been given a send-off game. So I think overall, the Canadian soccer has let them down.
That criticism comes as a recent study reveals a lot of countries may be letting their women footballers down. It found just 40% of participants in the World Cup consider themselves professional, as in they get paid to play. And 66% say they had to take time off of another job to play in the World Cup. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
To a very different sport now, a feat of endurance involving one of the Lower Mainland's hardest hikes. Yep, you guessed it. 80 people spent the day pushing through the pain, maxing out the zone, squeezing out the reps, whatever, to try to hike the Grouse Grind as many times as possible. The challenge started when the gates to the grind opened at 4 this morning. Many hikers did it several times before our camera arrived.
Doing the Grouse Grind really is a mental challenge as well as a physical challenge. I'm really in awe of all the participants today who have managed to do it even more than once. It is a great achievement.
This is the first time the Multigross Grind Challenge has run since 2019. On top of the registration fee, participants have to raise a minimum $100 donation for North Shore Rescue. All of them hope to do the grind 19 times before the gates closed at 10. Good luck. Have fun. Here's how Tofino looked earlier today. That grayish start to our official summer on the south coast. Johanna will have your BC-wide forecast right after this.
Ah, the beach. The hustle of the city seems so far away. Here you can enjoy the sound of the waves, watch the feathered bombers, dream your dreams, celebrate nature. For some, especially at Kitts Beach, the celebration demands music.
Summer's here, I'm for that. I got my rubber sand, I've got my straw hat, I got my cold beer, I'm just glad that it's here.
Thanks to the wonders of technology, we can all twitch to a different drummer these days without bothering anyone else. Headphones help us create our own soundscapes. But alas, some people want to share their music with everyone else. A lot of people these days carry big, high-powered radios and stereos to the beach. They're called blasters, and they literally blast the music all over the beach. Of course, there are differing points of view about all this free music on the beach. For some, it's simply a sociable part of the scene. For others, it's a nuisance, noise pollution. Why would you have speakers rather than just use your headphones?
Well, that way everybody can hear it. And here I can talk with my friends, right? And I can still listen to the music at the same time, right?
I think there should be a law against it.
I think it's not really nice if you've come to a place for peace and quiet and about 1 block away you can hear loud music that you don't want to hear. So I think they should have respect for other people and just keep it low.
Does anyone ever come up to you and say, hey, that's too loud, will you turn it down?
Not yet. I've seen a couple of old people, get up and move away. I don't know whether it's because of the music or what, but no one said anything to me, so.
Okay, so what would you say if they did say turn it down?
Bye.
It's not bad if they're all on the same station, but when they're all on different stations, you get a headache. Like you hear one out of one ear and one out of the other, and it sort of mixes up in between.
What really kills me are the ghetto blasters on the windsurfers out there. When there's no wind, they just hold them up to the sail and away they go.
It's my favorite time of the year, and I'm glad that it's here. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
CBC Vancouver is the premier media partner of the 2023 Surrey Fusion Festival, July 22nd and 23rd. Visit the festive cultural pavilions, enjoy free live music and family activities. And the 13th annual Indian Summer Festival takes place July 6th to the 16th. The festival's powerful 10-event lineup speaks to the theme of interdependence. Tickets at indiansummerfest.ca.
Today was the summer solstice, which means it was the longest day of the year. A perfect day for the annual Go Skateboarding Day. Biffed it. Hundreds of skaters round around in Vancouver using the city landscape as their playground with varying degrees of success. Still a good try. Skaters skated around the Plaza Skate Park for waffles, cruised through town, and capped things off with a barbecue at the Britannia Community Center.
It means get out there with your friends, get on your wheels, be outside, and just be free.
Since I was like 12, I was always pushing around, and now since everybody's so stoked on it, taking it a bit more seriously.
Skateboarding is one thing that just brings everybody together. You look at this group of people from all over the world, all different walks of life, and we're all here for one reason, and it's to get stoked on other people skateboarding. It's the best community to be a part of. I think everybody should get a skateboard today.
Reporters say the warm weather is what makes Vancouver a great hub for the sport, but they would like a covered park too. And many marked the summer solstice in Britain as revelers chanted and prayed at Stonehenge.
Hey, welcome.
Crowds gather at the 4,000-year-old site every year on this day. Many believe the massive stones were built to match the rising sun of the solstice, giving the site a spiritual heft. In other countries, the day is ushered in with dancing, ceremonies, and a glide around a maypole.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace, installing the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
On this first official calendar summer day.
You got it.
Got about 49 shades of gray there, Joe. Not a bad start.
Yeah, almost went to the 50, but
well, that's right. He's up there.
The start of the summer solstice was a dark one. It is our longest day of the year. Sunrise before just after 5 a.m., sunset after 9 p.m. But yeah, some dark clouds, showers, and cooler temperatures to kick off the official start of summer. And that's all thanks to this swirling low that's been sitting just south of the border for a couple of days now. We can see thunderstorm activity this evening across the spine of BC. Again, all associated with this low, even though we have high pressure building in from the west. It took for most of the day to even see the hint of blue sky on the south coast. That high pressure ridge, though, pushing in for the second half of the week. That swirling low has been great news for fire danger across the southeast. You can see how low it is with well over a week now of cooler temperatures and showers. That is going to rebound, though, back into high by the time we hit early next week as that ridge of high pressure builds back in. So here's Thursday into Friday, back into the high 20s by the time we hit the weekend for the interior. We're talking mid-20s for the south coast and approaching 30s for early next week in the interior. So we'll see that fire danger very quickly turn around with how dry our soil is. 22 tomorrow and through Williams Lake, so starting to see those temperatures recover already for your Thursday forecast. 25 in through Kelowna, starting to see the sunshine after a few days of that swirling low. And that's the story for Vancouver as well. 21 tomorrow, back to our seasonal. We'll see that sun and more like a 23 for Friday. By the time we hit the weekend, feeling like the mid to high 20s inland. And Dan, that hot trend just keeps on keeping on. So
keeps on being hot.
Yes,
all right.
The gray was nice this morning.
It actually
in conclusion.
was.
Yes.
Enjoy it. Remember
Yes.
it, folks. Thanks.
You're welcome.
And that is your late news for Wednesday. Thanks for joining us tonight. For news at any hour, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1. That starts tomorrow morning at 5:30. Good night.